Okay, so I thought I'd just take some time to share from my journey over the last, well, I guess it would be the last 11, 12 years, although sometimes we don't know where this journey that we're on actually started, but the last 11 or 12 years particularly has been, wow, unpredictable, challenging, at times exhilarating, painful, and yet worth it. It has been a journey that I realized started with a question. And I'm a big believer in the power of questions. I believe questions are the necessary tools to unearth the potential that lies within inside of us. So a great question to ask you right now is, what's the number one question that you're wrestling with? I think the question that a person is wrestling with reveals a lot about them, their current motive, their current expectation of what they believe they're capable of. I think it also reveals where they're at, or where we are at, on the journey of delivering to the world the impact that we carry. See, I believe that every person has been designed on purpose. I don't believe in a worldview that suggests that we're here by accident, random chance, or by random happening. I believe that you're here by design, and therefore inside of you, you carry the seed of your future. And that's a huge concept to accept. And it was a concept that I realized a number of years ago, that I carry this future in me that is trying to get out. And I've used this analogy multiple times, but when my wife had our children, we've got 3 children, they were all quite large babies in terms of the weight that they were when they were born. And my wife's only small. And so she was carrying, big babies. Ruben was 10 pounds. And it is the most excruciating process to deliver that child into the world. I didn't feel a thing. I just had some sleep deprivation, so I got off lightly. But of course, it's worth it. You know that what you're delivering into this world is another human life with unlimited potential to deliver change that leaves the world better. And of course, impacts from an eternal perspective, uh, has a great influence and tremendous opportunity to make a difference. And so when that baby is born, there's 2 sides. There's the pain, and then there's the promise. You've got the promise of life and what could be, but you've got the pain of what is. And I think it's that tension that the last 11, 12 years I've had to come to understand, that I have to live in that tension. Everything within us as human beings tries to resolve tension, because our default is to be reactive to our emotions. Because let's face it, we feel our emotions. They are front of mind. They are, the thing that we immediately have to either react to or deal with. And in those moments when you've got the pain, the promise isn't always at hand, in terms of, I don't immediately think of the promise. I don't immediately think of, well, this is why I'm feeling this. But we've got to learn how to do that. We've got to learn how we can embrace that tension, because for as long as the promise is present, the pain isn't going to go away. So it's good news and bad news. The promise is there to stay. You will carry promise till the day that you die. Now, whether you deliver on that promise, you deliver that promise to this world, you take the responsibility and moral obligation to deliver that impact, that change, that positive influence. Well, that's down to you. That's down to me. The promise is always going to be there, but for as long as we prioritize the promise, we are going to also prioritize the pain. And that is an essential part of the journey, just as much as the pain of the woman giving birth is a part of new life entering into this world. So part of my journey has been wrestling with the questions that I have been trying to answer to make sense of what is the promise, because it's an ongoing, unfolding mystery. You never fully define the promise because the promise is attached to my potential. If my potential is unlimited, then it's an unfolding story. So I will never get to the point where I fully understand to the full extent what the promise is. But as I embrace a question that leans into that mystery, I am also going to start to learn how to manage that pain, because that's what a question does. When a question is positioned correctly in relation to the promise, it's future focused, then it produces hope in us. And there's a proverb in the Bible that says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So whenever we can't attach hope to current pain, we become sick. We become sick, emotionally, mentally, physically. But when we learn to put hope into that current discomfort, and we do that through the question that we're wrestling with, then we can embrace that pain. So that's good news today. If you're experiencing the pain of frustration, the pain of disappointment, the pain of delay, the pain of what appears to be a denial of opportunity or a denial of making progress, the good news is today, the way that you can embrace the tension and make that pain work for you, to propel you into the promise, is to ask yourself, what's the question that I am engaging with? So here are 5 questions that I've wrestled with. So I thought I'd just start here, and I'm going to share more in the coming weeks and months. And if you find this helpful, do just drop a comment, a message. I am going to get better at engaging in conversation online, and because I want to help you, I want to help you deliver on that promise that you carry, the promise of your potential to impact this world. That's my calling. My calling is to help you get out of you what I believe God has put in there, whether you believe God put it in there or not. I believe that we all need help to draw that out of us, and we need people to ask us questions, to bring challenge and encouragement to help us make progress. So that's what I'm going to do if you want. So drop some questions, comments, etc. Let's keep the conversation going. But here are 5 questions that my wife will know I have asked these questions multiple times, and I guess probably these questions were most prominent in the points of pain when the pain was the greatest. So here they are. First question is this. By the way, if you see me crying, just every now and again I get watery eyes. So I could be getting emotional, but it could just be my eye tear ducts giving off water. So first question is this. Is it just me? Is it just me? So this is a question that comes from the fact that there have been many times when I've been in situations and circumstances, in conversations, in conferences, and I'm seeing something, and I'm seeing a problem and maybe a solution as well, but I'm not seeing others who are seeing the same things. And so immediately it makes me think, well, why am I seeing it? Why aren't they seeing it? Maybe others can't see it because it's not there to be seen. Maybe it's just my overactive imagination. Maybe I'm seeing something that really isn't there. Maybe it's just a crazy idea, crazy thought. But when something keeps coming and finding you, and you keep seeing the same gap, you keep seeing the same problem, for me that's a key indicator of your purpose. I use this analogy, plot, in my book The Winning Conversation and The Winning Keys. And plot stands for, what's the problem that you believe you're alive to solve? What is it that you love to do? You have energy for, and you have no problem kind of doing that, uh, even if you weren't paid, and you probably would just keep doing it and forget about eating because that's something you're passionate about. So that's L. O, what is obvious to you? In other words, there's something that's obvious to you that isn't obvious to everyone else, and this is part of the problem because that's a pain when others don't see something obvious that we think is obvious. But actually, flip that around. That's an opportunity. Like if everybody could see the same thing, then how are you going to outwork your unique design? How are you going to outwork your unique impact? Well, so there's going to be something that you see that others don't see. So again, this is where sometimes what is painful because it makes you feel sometimes different, maybe makes you feel isolated, makes you feel odd, an outlier. That's a feeling, but when you think about it rationally, if you believe that you are to have a unique impact and contributions to this world, then of course you're going to see something others can't see. So again, you can see the promise and the pain. Okay, the promise and the pain. Another kind of thing that the question, is it just me, kind of cause me to kind of go down a negative route of questioning is it's not a big enough issue for others. If this gap isn't something that other people can see or even people think is worthy of addressing, then maybe it's not meant to be, because people have got to see the issue. And if they can't see the issue, then what am I going to do with it if I'm the only one who can see the issue? Another one is, it keeps getting my attention. And actually, that's therefore a distraction because very often the thing that we're thinking through, because this is connected to vision, it's not necessarily about what's going to happen in the immediate moment. I can't necessarily deliver on a change to deal with that problem or that gap that I can see. And so sometimes I think, it's just a distraction. I'm getting distracted. I'm just going to get on with what I've got to get on with. And so again, it can become a negative challenge. Like, why do I keep seeing it? Is it just me? But here's some positives here that I've understood from that question. When you look at something, there's a saying, I think it was Miles Monroe who I first heard say it. Whether he came up with it or not, I don't know. But you look with your eyes, but you see with your heart. You look with your eyes. So what I see physically round about me in this room right now, I'm looking at with my physical eyes. But when I'm talking about what could be, a gap that I see missing, I'm looking at that through my heart. Because through your heart, which is, of course, your conscious and subconscious mind, that is, you're looking through the prism of your character, your values, what truly matters to you. So that's one part of the lens that you're looking through. You're looking through the lens of your competency. So you have gifts, talents, and skills to be able to see something. So a carpenter, for instance, can look at just a lump of wood that was right in front of them right now, and they would be looking with their eyes at a lump of wood, but with their heart, they'd be looking it through their competency, and they can see a lovely kind of chair or table that they could create. So you get the idea. So you look through the prism of your character, you look through the prism of your competency, you look through the prism of your capacity. So again, yeah, this is another key angle here. When you are living such a busy life, and this is why so many people kind of hit halfway through their life and just suddenly stop and take a breath and think, well, how have I ended up here? I've landed in a job that I don't know really how I landed up in it or ended up in it. I didn't necessarily choose it; it kind of chose me. And people get midlife crisis. They have kind of great points of like reflection over their life, and of course, COVID over the few years ago, lots of people hit this point because suddenly their capacity or the demand on their capacity was reduced, so they had time to think. So again, we look at something through. So for instance, if you use the kind of carpentry analogy, if that carpenter is absolutely rushed off his feet, he'll probably just run past that block of wood because he's got so much other things on his mind. But when he has time to stop and to think, he looks through the prism of his character, he looks through the prism of his competency, and he looks through the prism of his capacity. But then here's the fourth part of the prism that we look through, And this is probably the part which is an ongoing, unfolding mystery. I mean, the other three are kind of, you're not the same character today as you were a year ago. So they're all kind of four of these areas are ongoing. But I think the most misunderstood and mishandled is your calling. So your calling. So we look through the prism of our calling. So now, I have a clarity on my calling to raise a movement of MVPs who can produce MVPs, because I figured the only way in which we're going to start to make some really significant impacts in this world, to make this world a better place, a place where people can flourish and be empowered to live out their God-given identity and design, is to produce MVPs who can create environments where what is in people can come out. So I'm looking through the prism of my character, my competency, my capacity, and my calling. And so I think when I ask the question, is it just me? That question is actually telling me my calling is starting to reveal itself another notch, another degree. There's more there's more that's trying to get out. And so again, rather than it being kind of a negative, oh, is it just me? Why am I the only one? Again, I flip it and I realize that's the pain, but the promise is, yeah, wow, there's something unique for just me. You see, it's the same question, but it's just how you frame the question. So I think, to encourage you, there is going to be something in your life uh, as part of your calling, related to how you've been designed and the purpose that you've been created for by God. There is something just for you, but that's going to create a sense of loneliness potential. But again, part of my calling is to help create a conversation and community where actually you can really not get lost in the isolation. Find people who understand what's going on, understand the process that you're undergoing, and can help you through that. So you don't feel alone, so you can accelerate that process, and so that you can make sense of that process. And so again, that's my job. That's what I'm here to serve, to help you to do. So expect to be in the minority on this journey. Expect to be in the minority because a lot of people don't see their character correctly, so that they're not looking through the correct prism. They don't see themselves through their values. They see themselves based upon how they have been defined by others or their environment. They don't see it through their competency, because maybe they've not developed actually the gifts, talents, and skills that they have. Maybe they haven't had opportunity. Maybe they have chosen a route of less resistance and just kind of a familiar pattern. Maybe they are so busy that they don't have the capacity. Maybe they don't understand what their calling is. So there's a whole load of people that are part of the majority, which I'd love to shift and change, but I think part of the story, and this comes where worldview comes in, which is something that I help people really define. Like, what is your worldview? What is the game that you're in? Because until you know what the game that you're in, it's hard to know, like, well, has the player turned up? Well, the player is connected to the game. A rugby player doesn't turn up to a football game. It's the wrong game. And part of the tension sometimes is we're turning up each day and we're playing the wrong game. And we're looking around thinking, well, this doesn't resonate. This isn't fit. And again, worldview is absolutely key, probably one of the most misunderstood areas. But part of the worldview is that there is a minority, and it usually is a minority that delivers the change. So welcome to the minority if you are willing to embrace the pain as well as the promise. And again, you are going to be part of a minority because just time and history tells us that those who deliver significant change, societal change, industry change, sector change, they are in the minority. But hey, I believe you've got it in you. So is it just me? Probably, most definitely in some respects. And that's a good thing. But you've got to manage that question and that process with the pain and the promised tension. Okay. So the second question is this. So am I just bored? So, my background is that I grew up in the church. From an early age, I wanted to become a pastor of a church, which is a kind of like a term for the leader of a church. Some parts of Christianity have vicars, priests, etc. But I was part of kind of a contemporary part of church, Pentecostal church. So I wanted to become a pastor. That's what my dad was. And that was my aspiration. And so I could see the impact that he was having on people's lives, in terms of not only their spirituality, but their families. And I just thought, wow, this is what a way to deliver change. And of course, from my faith worldview as well, you know, I really believe this was part of my calling. So I think, I said 11 or 12 years ago, these questions started to surface. So I was probably, what was I? I was probably already 13 or 14 years into leading church. I started leading church at a very early age in terms of becoming the kind of the senior leader of a church. I think I was 21/22. And and so I'd already been going 11, 12 years, but was starting to feel uh, that I was bored. And so, and when I say bored, be careful how I say that, but I'm losing interest with the current framework of what church had become, and that's a key thing, because I think I started to feel guilty. Wow, how can you be bored with church? How can you be bored with being involved with God? And of course, I realize now, looking back, that actually we put all of this stuff together. God, church, religion, and actually there is some stuff in there that is absolutely God's original stuff, but then there's a whole lot of man-made stuff, and so we've got this kind of combination that needs to be separated. And I think over the last kind of 11, 12 years, I've been through this process of like separating, right, what is principle? What are the unchanging principles, the enduring principles of what must be in our lives as followers of Christ, what must be in our church, what is the church, what is the mission of the church, and separating principles from preferences, because a whole load of man-made traditions, what I call preferences, have been alloyed with principles, and sometimes we mistake preferences for principles, and they're not. And so I was getting bored with a lot of the preferences, but not the principles. But maybe right now you're getting bored. Creative people, and everybody is creative. I don't believe in this whole thing of like, I know we have left brain, right brain people, where one side of the brain is like the creative, one side is more kind of the logistical, analytical. Yeah, I get that. But I believe fundamentally at the heart of every human being, we are creative. We may have different creative frequencies that we operate in and ways that we outwork it. But at our heart, we are all creative. But creative people get itchy feet. And so again, I was thinking, well, maybe I'm just getting itchy feet. Maybe this is like maybe I'm having a midlife crisis really early on, because this was around when I was like in early 30s. And so, like, wow, maybe I've just accelerated that. Maybe I'm having it early. Maybe this is like my pre-midlife crisis. And so I was starting to feel guilty. Am I just getting distracted by other things? The shiny object syndrome. Oh, look what these people are doing over there. That looks a whole lot more exciting than what I'm doing. And don't get me wrong, we're all prone to that. So that, yeah, I'm sure absolutely there was some of that in there. But at its heart, I think, in fact, if you're asking these questions and you're asking them with the humility that really wants to get the answer, and you're not just accepting, yeah, well, I'm bored, and because that's where pride can kick in, and I deserve more than this, and this is bad, and I'm looking for what is good, and we can get lost in a whole lot of pride in that question. But I think if we're asking it from a place of humility, no, I want to grow, I want to learn, I really want to understand, like, why am I feeling this? Then if you're asking it with that kind of frame of humility, then these are good questions to ask. And so what I realized is, no, yes, I am getting bored, but I'm probably getting bored with the right things, because part of, again, looking through my prism, either the things aren't aligning to my character, my values, they're not aligning to my competencies, because again, we tend to have organizations and structures that are one size fits all, but your competency, there is no job title that can could be identical to the unique competency that you carry. I know you can call a doctor because they help make people well, but even every doctor has unique competencies that make them distinctive from other doctors. So there is no title that can properly land your competency. And so again, just accept that, yeah, titles are helpful, they're useful signposts, but they're not truly going to satisfy. If that's what you're looking for a title, for number one, give up that race and chase to start with. People ask me, what is it that I do? And I've given up trying to really explain through a title because it just doesn't work. So I just kind of get to the heart of, right, well, I'm here to help people become the MVP I believe they can become, and to help develop other MVPs. Now that will generate more questions than answers, because they're like, well, if they don't know what an MVP is, what is an MVP? So it sets off this whole thing. But again, I'm starting to get comfortable. It's not always comfortable or easy, but I'm starting to get comfortable with that. And so I realized, okay, I'm in this process where I'm understanding what is dying and what is growing. There's part of me and part of what I'm in that is dying. And actually, you should be bored with what is dying. You should be bored with what is dying. In fact, the fact that you're bored about a certain area could be an indication that that area is dying and needs to be shed. It needs to be kind of separated. I say the last 11, 12 years, there's probably been more kind of shedding and separating from to what I look at in terms of progress than adding. I'm sure there's lots more that's been added than I realized, but sometimes based upon our experience and our metric of growth and progress, to me, it looks more like that I've been losing than I've been winning. But for me, that losing has been losing the right things to set me up to win with the right things. And so you're either dying or you're growing. If you are innovating, if you're part of an organization that's innovating, then you are going to go through a process of understanding, like, this is now dead, or this is dying, and this is what's trying to happen. This is the new life that's trying to manifest. And so you're constantly in this process of facilitating growth, but also facilitating death. But if you're not innovating, then you're dying. Now, this is a huge point, because it can be confusing when we're part of an organization, a company, a business, a church, where there are signs that it's alive and that it's growing. But let me tell you right now, that I absolutely believe by principle that if you are not innovating, then you actually are dying. Something can be dying but appear to be still living, and appear to still be growing. But death can already be at work in that organization, that business, and especially certain businesses that are in industries where maybe there's a lack of competition, there's a lack of, or it's an industry where people are always going to need that service, so the death can become so slow that it doesn't appear to be dying. And to some extent, I believe that to be the case in a lot of models of church today. The problem is it still looks like it's growing. But actually, if we were to zoom out over 100-year period, or even a 200-year period, we'll actually see signs that it's dying right now. So again, I'm not saying that I have all the answers here. I want to create a conversation with others who are saying we are committed to innovating, to understanding what is trying to happen, facilitate future, but also to facilitate the graceful passing of what should be put to death. And how do we do that? How do we do that in a way that actually unlocks the latent potential inside of people? Because fundamentally, that's what it's about. It's not about organizations, institutional organizations. It's about people. It all comes down to people. So again, boredom or feeling bored could be a sign that something has shifted in you. You may not be able to explain what has shifted, but usually a shift takes place before we can explain it. Usually we can only explain it when we're looking back rather than looking ahead, which can be mightily confusing, because we all want to be able to see it ahead, because then when we explain it, we feel we're in control of it. Again, huge challenge, because we are control freaks by nature, but we're actually designed to be on this journey not alone, but again, for me, it is a co-mission. It is a journeying with God. So as long as one of us can see the end from the beginning and is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-wise, then cool. I'm happy with being limited, being imperfect. Well, I'm not happy with being imperfect, but you understand what I mean. I recognize my need of that partnership. So, and the great thing is that God knows the shift that is taking place, and He's not hiding it from me. He's hiding it for me. He wants to reveal it, and actually, through the intimacy of that relationship, is where I get to get revelation, get understanding, and so, you know, something has shifted in you if you're starting to feel bored, and most likely, and again, this may help some of us because we can make some costly errors when we attribute the wrong meaning to why we're bored. We can exit jobs too early. We can exit relationships thinking it's the relationship that's a problem. We can exit um, places where we live thinking, well, it's where I live, that's the problem. We can make all these costly errors. And I'm not saying that, there aren't times when those shifts take place in our lives, but fundamentally, the shift usually happens at a much deeper level. It's actually at the worldview level. It's actually at the belief level. It's actually at the most deepest and most significant level. The challenge is that a lot of people don't understand it. And again, this is where my role, my job is to help you understand like what your current worldview is, what maybe the shift of worldview that is taking place in you um, is, and what's happening, and by asking you the right questions, accelerate that process to define and get clarity on that worldview so that you can start to make peace with the shift and realize, actually, no, I'm getting, I thought I was getting bored with these things, but actually it's not these things. And therefore, I'm not going to make that costly mistake. It's actually this that I'm getting bored with. And actually, that's okay to get bored with that because a shift is taking place. I hope that makes sense. Third question, is this fatigue? Is this fatigue? When you've been doing something for a long period of time, of course, there are going to be natural points at which you feel tired. You feel maybe I just need a break. And I got to be honest with you, I haven't been the best person. In fact, I've probably been the worst person at taking breaks, you know, from what I do. And so fatigue absolutely can play a part. And I think it's important to understand, there are days when we feel tired. And if we make any permanent decision in that temporary state, we will regret it. So it's really important to understand, okay, maybe if I take a break right now, that will just help me to reframe the situation. I'll come back fresh, renewed vitality and vigor. So I at times I was thinking, okay, is this fatigue? And behind that question was a recognition, wow, it's taking me more energy today to deliver less results than it did 5 years ago. It would take me less energy and I'd achieve more results. So, it's almost like, in Ecclesiastes, it talks about the axe head. If you sharpen the axe, then less effort is required to chop down the tree. But we often don't have time to sharpen the axe. So we're kind of throwing more energy behind the axe, but for less results. So there absolutely, there is that sense in which, wow, I'm becoming dull. And that could be down to, a lack of capacity and a lack of looking after ourselves physically and mentally and emotionally. But actually, behind that question, I learned to separate, okay, what is fatigue based upon just simply, healthy rhythm of rest and activity, but actually, what is it now that needs to change? Is this the end of this role? Is this the end of this season in my life? Is this the end of an era in my life? And again, when it came to church, for instance, because for within my world, the pinnacle was to become the senior leader of a church. But for me, that title wasn't helpful. I was getting bored with the setup of what church had become, this event-driven, for us, monster. And I don't mean that there was lots of good stuff that happened, but for me, it became an untamable um, monster that started to rule us rather than us rule it in terms of our lives. And and I started to realize, wow, I'm actually getting fatigued with what is not life giving. And that's a key thing now. I think we lose energy, and we it takes more energy to achieve less results, when actually what's happened is what we're doing is not life-giving. It's not aligned to what is in us. And I think at the moment that something comes out of alignment, it's like when you're driving a car and one of the wheels is out of alignment. It takes more energy to steer. Steering a car certainly on a motorway or highway that is straight should not take any energy. And yet, if you feel like you're having to constantly keep pulling, something is wrong. There's a tire out of alignment. And so there's something out of alignment, either as the four levels I talk about, either at a physical level, so that could be just tiredness, at a mental level, that could be, just the way that I'm currently framing what's going on. It could be at an emotional level. Okay, maybe I'm not surrounding myself with the right people, and therefore something out is out of alignment in me. Or at a spiritual level, actually, though, no, there's something more significant that's taking place here. I'm actually on the wrong highway, or I'm actually in the wrong vehicle. So again, or I'm in the wrong seat. I mean, I could take that analogy as far as you want to take it, but essentially the fatigue, if I approach that question correctly, actually can be revealing to me something that I need to take notice of. My problem was that I often thought, well, Gareth, you're just being ungrateful. Look at how far, you've come, and the people that have helped and served alongside you and with you, have championed you, parents who have supported you, invested in you, ultimately God who has entrusted what he has kind of given to you. And so, like, this feeling of un- ungratefulness, and is this discontentment that is really unhealthy? Again, is this midlife crisis? But I think what I needed to do, and I did do, is to step out, and with my wife, we would kind of test run all options. In other words, okay, there were many points in which I thought, okay, let's just stop. Maybe we're just not leaders of church. Maybe that's not what we're supposed to do. Maybe it's a shift from one role to another role. And for some people that might be the shift that they need to take. But for us, actually, it wasn't a shift from role from A to B. It was actually that we were trying to create C, which we had no understanding of what that looked like yet. And C was going to be an amalgamation of parts of what we had been doing, um, but also parts of something that we were starting to get involved with as I was building the business and starting to coach people and be involved in other sectors and industries. And over the last several years, in education, sport, healthcare, business, and individuals who are involved in different areas of society. So differing in a number of different areas to different levels, realizing actually, no, wow, okay, what's happening here is there's an innovation. It's not A or B. Actually, it's moving from A through B, which is just a point in which I've got to move through. It's a valley moment, which feels incredibly isolating and lonely at times, but I have to go through B to get to C, because C is the future that's trying to happen. C is the impact and influence I'm to deliver to this world. The problem is C, doesn't exist yet in terms of what I'm to become, because I'm unique. There may be people doing something similar to what I will be doing, but not identical. And so I realize, actually, no, we started to test run lots of options. Well, if we gave up leading church, then maybe it would look like this. Or maybe no, maybe it's a distraction and I've just got to put it to death and just do what I've always done. And we'd run through those scenarios, kind of like, okay, in 5 years' time, would we be happy with that? Where would we be as a couple? Where would we be as a family? Where would the church, where would the business be? Where, or is it to go and get a job in a different industry? Again, we ran through the scenarios and took time to run through them, because we wanted to see what resonated. And actually, what we realized was that we weren't happy with leaving one A for B. We didn't just want to stay at A, what we'd always done. We didn't want to leave A for B and just start doing something completely different. We wanted C, which was an emergence of a new form. And I believe I'm speaking to people right now where maybe you are going to deliver the new form of a competency that already exists, but it's going to be different because it's going to come through you. You may be in healthcare, and so you may be a doctor in the healthcare industry, but actually the uniqueness that's going to come through you. C for you is going to be kind of embracing the tension of what's happening now between A and B, and to start understanding, okay, based upon my worldview and the story that I believe I'm a part of, C is the significant change that I'm going to deliver. And because it doesn't exist right now, it can be a challenging journey. But hey, do you know what? I want to help you on that journey. I know by the very nature of the competency that I've been graced with, that I can ask anybody, whoever you are. I don't care if you are the King of England or right now you are a 16-year-old college student, whether you are cleaning toilets for a living, or whether you are selling uh, the most expensive houses in the world. I don't know. In that sense, I don't care what you do. I believe you carry potential in you, and it's the questions that you're wrestling with are going to determine whether the promise that is in you gets out, and whether you can handle the pain of that tension. So that was the third question: is this fatigue? And then the final question was like, am I just rebellious? Actually, it's not the final question, the penultimate question. Am I rebellious? Maybe it's just something fundamentally wrong with me. Maybe actually, I am asking these questions, nobody else is, because, they're all better than me. They're more content. They're more grateful. And Gareth, you're just a discontent, ungrateful, you know, idealist. And I had to kind of wrestle with that. And I asked myself the question, if I changed what I did and I went from A and chose B instead, then would I just simply be transferring the same issue? So, if suddenly I wasn't in church world and I found myself in healthcare or in education, would I still be seeing the gap that I could see? And here's the amazing thing, and this has been the most, in one sense, strange, liberating thing. The gaps that I saw in church, which I thought were just unique to church, I realized, wow, these gaps are in healthcare. These gaps are in sport. These gaps are in healthcare. These gaps are in education. I started to realize these gaps exist wherever people are gathered to achieve a common goal. And I realized, wow, just changing the setting and the backdrop is just going to be transporting the problem is going to transport the gap that I keep seeing, because actually what I'm rebelling against, and here's the thing, because to all these questions, in one sense, as I've guessed by now, the answer is yes and no. So we'll come back to, is it just me? Well, yes and no. Yes, it is just you seeing it because you're unique, you're different. But no, it's not, because there are people that you're going to need, and they need you to deliver on the change. Am I just bored? Well, you're not just bored. It's not boredom in the sense of, you're an entitled, spoiled kid who needs constant entertainment. But yes, you are bored because you're getting bored with the right things. Is it fatigue? Well, no, as in like even when I'm physically and mentally and emotionally topped up, I'm still seeing the same thing. But it is fatigue in terms of I'm tired with what is not life-giving. And why is it not life-giving? Well, maybe it's because I shouldn't be connected to it, or it shouldn't exist, or it needs to be innovated. So am I rebellious? Well, I'm not rebellious because I'm just intentionally, crossing my arms and saying, I'm just going to be a problem. I'm going to be an obstacle. That's my purpose in life. No, I am actually rebelling. And first and foremost, and here's the key thing, we are rebelling, but what we're rebelling against first and foremost is inside. Because coming back to the prism that we look through, the problem that we see will create a tension in us, because the problem is always bigger than the character that we currently are. Yeah, let me use the example of David and Goliath, well-known biblical story. Most people know the analogy. David, shepherd boy, not a military person, arrives on scene to a state of war with this huge dude called Goliath, saying, who's going to come and fight me? And the Israelites singing songs of victory, but nobody actually stepping up and taking him on. And David rocks up and sees the problem. He's like, well, who's this guy think he is? But the problem is everyone's looking at David saying, well, why are you even asking that? Like, who are you? Like, who do you think you are? You just get back with those sheep that you've been looking after. So you're always going to see a problem bigger than the character that's just turned up. But in that moment, again, for David, his worldview was, no, this is wrong. And therefore, if it is wrong and I have seen it and I am aware of it, then there is a compatibility between the problem I see and the solution I carry. And so there is a rebellion that takes place, because we have to rebel against the parts of us that say, I'm not that kind of a person. I can't do that. I won't be able to deliver on that. I haven't got what it takes. There is always going to be that battle, that civil war between the losing version of you and the winning version of you. And so you have to rebel. You have to rebel against the version of you that is trying to hold you back. You can't negotiate with that part of you that needs to be terminated. There's a part of Gareth that daily I need to put to death, because if I don't, and I listen to the wrong version of Gareth, then I am going to become the NPC. I'm going to become that non-playable character. I don't deliver on my impact. I don't deliver on the difference that I carry. And so there is a rebellion that has to take place in the right sense of the word. And so yes, I am rebellious, but no, I'm not rebellious in the sense in which, on my journey, I wasn't trying to be different for different sake. And again, I had to. That's probably been, out of all these questions, this one was the most difficult, because and this kind of is going to lead us in a minute to the final one. There's an overlap here, because I guess when you see something that can be changed, and if that change is significant, it's like there needs to be a revolution. There needs to be a shift of power. And especially if what you're seeing is something that is disempowering in your environment, and you want to see it become empowering. There's a reason why an environment, a culture, a systemic problem in an industry is disempowering. It's because there's a manipulating, controlling force that needs to be overruled and overpowered. So that's a revolution that needs to take place. And at the heart of any revolution, there has to be a righteous rebellion. If what needs to be overturned is wrong. And so what I realized is, I'm not rebellious against the people. So it was not the people in the church. It was not people who were doing the same role as me. Just because you're the senior leader of a church, I'm not having a go at other people who have this same title. I'm not rebellious against people. I'm rebellious against a system. I'm rebellious against a system that is disempowering what people are carrying. And the problem is, it's not as binary sometimes as a system is completely disempowering, and kind of disenfranchising people. It's about measuring against potential. If an environment is unlocking 60% of people's potential, and we're happy with that, then we're not going to rebel against that system. But if we recognize this system is holding back and leaving 40% on the table, then am I happy with that? And I guess the problem comes when you're not happy with that. I say the problem, or the promise, it comes when you're not happy with that. And for me, I have an insatiable desire to see potential realized, that people live their life to the fullest, and to deliver what is in them. I believe it's our moral obligation and responsibility to do that and to help people to do that and to remove all unnecessary obstacles and blockages out of the way. So there is a rebellion. And my worldview says, that there is a battle going on. There is a battle. And if we are in a warfare between good and evil ultimately wants to disempower and disenfranchise, good wants to empower and to embolden what is right in people, then there's a war that takes place, and either I'm ambivalent, uh, to what's taking place, which is dangerous because either I'm part of the problem or I'm going to be a casualty of the problem. So I am I rebellious? No to people, but yes to a system. And then the final thing was the final question. And I hope that this is helpful. And please, on any of these points, just let me know what particularly resonated and what your journey has been. Again, let's create a conversation where people feel like, yeah, Jonathan, some of this sounds and sometimes feels very, very deep, but it absolutely shapes everything that we're doing day to day. And so we've got to go deep to go high. We've got to ask the bigger questions of life in order to deal with, how are our daily tactics actually shifting the needle? So the final question is this: am I simply an idealist? Am I simply an idealist? Optimists have blind spots. And my question was, is this just a huge blind spot? Is the fact that I believe that I am the person to start to help close this gap? And it's such a huge gap that I kept saying in multiple places. So then I came to the conclusion that, okay, well, my job isn't to be the person to close all the gaps. My job is to create the conversation to help others who are starting to see gaps and to help equip and empower those people to close the gaps. So, there's a collective, none of us are playing this game alone or should be playing this game alone. We certainly won't win it alone. But I was asking the question, am I just an optimist? Is this just idealism? Am I just living in the future and not the present? There's a saying uh, within Christendom that says, being heavenly minded, no earthly good. Is this a kind of a version of that? All future minded and no present good. The issues were so big that I could see so deeply entrenched. Why would I be the kind of person who could make the difference? Again, that's just idealism, Gareth. It's just idealism. And you're just going to annoy yourself and annoy everybody else because it's like a dangling a carrot on a stick, one in which you cannot obtain. But I had to realize, yes, I am an idealist, but what is idealism if it is not hope? And if we don't have a hope for a future that sits in the category right now of what looks impossible, then what does progress actually mean? All progress, significant progress has happened, positive progress in our history has been because somebody one day decided to do something that at that point was categorized as impossible. And for me, the word impossible does not exist in God's dictionary. So any job that God gives me is going to be, by man's definition, impossible, but by God's definition, absolutely possible with his involvement. By me understanding the character of who he's created me to be, understanding the competency that I have and need to keep developing, understanding the capacity that I have to manage in my life, stop doing some things just so I can start doing the right things. And then understanding my calling. What am I to deliver to this world? What am I going to be accountable to? And again, that's a huge part of a worldview. Do I actually believe I'm going to be accountable for who I'm becoming, what I'm carrying, the skills and talents that, let's face it, anybody who's gifted at football, soccer for our American friends, anybody who's been gifted that, you've worked hard to develop that talent, but you're not the originator of that talent. It was in you. Well, who put it there? So again, that's worldview. You may say, well, it was just there. I believe God put it there. But either which way, do I believe I'm going to be accountable for that? So suddenly, if you have a worldview that says, I'm going to be accountable for this, then all of a sudden, actually, this is a pain that I have to wrestle. This is a promise that I have to start to understand. And I have to go on this journey. And, that tension, and I started with tension, I'm gonna end with tension. Tension is essential. Any team, organization, church, group that does not embrace tension is dying. Tension is a sign of life. The human body functions because of tension. When people say, do you know, get fit, what is fitness? Fitness is putting your body through tension in order to produce health and fitness. Tension is essential. Your diet, it's about limiting and limiting the wrong things, and or things that are too much can be wrong, and embracing some new things that are going to be helpful and good for you. And you don't always feel like doing it. It's a tension, but all tension is essential. But the problem is, as human beings, we avoid tension. We avoid tension, and any avoidance of tension will ultimately lead in some form of destruction. The problem is that tension is often a conversation that we avoid, and so many things have died that never needed to die. So many things have died that never needed to die. Marriages have died. Relationships between parents and children have died. Businesses have died. Organizations have died because conversations weren't had, tension wasn't embraced, either out of ignorance of the requirement to have that conversation or an avoidance. And avoid the tension, and we start to avoid the promise of what the potential of that team can deliver. And so again, you're on our own, left to my own devices. Being honest with you, I will naturally avoid the conversations that embrace tension. But tension, that positive conflict to produce a better outcome, is essential. And let me end here, because ultimately, my role in all of this is to try and help cultivate a conversation that embraces tension for the sake of transformation. Transformation in you, so transformation can come through you. And to become the MVP that I believe that you are and have the potential to deliver to this world, but it's up to you whether you become it, you have to start having the conversations. And having the conversations that are going to help you get out of you what is in you. It sometimes the urgency is the pain that we're feeling. Sometimes the promise doesn't look urgent. But right now, if you need to deliver, I have to be on this right now, then I want you to be part of this conversation. I want you to be part of our forums that we create. We're creating conversations now where we can come together and we can talk about these things. You can look on the links below and find out how you can join in this conversation and add your voice. I want your voice. We need your voice. Like, we are all in this together. So, hey, if this has resonated, let me know how, and join us in the conversation, and whatever I can do to help serve you, that's what I am called to do. And so thank you for listening, and let's keep going. Remember, you are a champion, and there's more inside of you than you think. Take care.